was great. That was fun because, like I said, we'd had tough years, a lot of losing teams. And actually, the first year I made the Pro Bowl, we were 7-9, but I got the MVP in the national conference. So, yeah, in those days they didn't pick but 2 quarterbacks on each team to go to the Pro Bowl. So it was Roger Staubach and myself with the quarterbacks. And now Roger is such a great Hall of Fame player and became a good friend. He's today one of my good friends. And I think the first year, Bob Greasy, Jerry Bradshaw were the 2 quarterbacks for the American Conference. The next year, I went back to Pro Bowl. Dan Fouts was one of the quarterbacks. So my running backs were a couple of Mississippi guys. First year I went, Walter Payton and Wilbert Montgomery. That was pretty cool. And to play with Walter, one of the all-time great. But other than playing with, I played under Bud Grant. Hall of Fame coach, Vikings, tremendous coach. As a matter of fact, I guess it kind of served me well. A few years later, I'd been traded to Houston, and we were kind of walling around over there. And Minnesota's quarterback got hurt, and Bud Grant traded for me to come to Minnesota, where I finished my career. So, but you're right, playing in the Pro Bowl was a great thrill, great memories. Peyton and Eli, of course, played in a lot more Pro Bowls than me, but I know they cherished their time doing that too. The best thing about it is getting to know another coaching staff, but getting to know so many other players that around the league and great players.
Did you have a role model, like a quarterback you really admired, that you kind of not modeled yourself after, but I mean, Jack Nicklaus was.
Well, when I was growing up, of course, I guess my first hero, my dad, was a New York Giants fan because their quarterback, this is when I was really young, their quarterback was from Mississippi, Charlie Conley, and number 42. And so I people in New York, when Eli went to the Giants, people kind of found that hard to believe that I grew up a Giants fan, but that's why, because my dad liked Charlie Conley. But as I started watching the game, some of the guys I liked really, really early on. I liked Fran Parkinson. Now, at Drew, in high school, I ran a lot. I ran around a lot, and even at Ole Miss, and that's kind of what Fran was. Fran was one of the original scramblers, and I was always a big Fran Parkinson fan. And I think, like everyone in those days, so you liked the best was probably Johnny Unitas, and I was no different. Gosh, I can remember when I was a young player with the Saints, Johnny Unitas was doing TV work that year, and he did our game, and that was the first time I met him. I mean, he wanted to visit with me about the game, and I just wanted to ask him about some of those old Colts teams and Lenny Moore and Gino Marchetti and the great players they had. So, and even when I went into pro ball, Jim, some of the older quarterbacks that were so nice to me, I just can't thank them enough and feel indebted to people like Roman Gabriel and John Brody and Sonny Jurgensen and Lenny Dawson. Guys, the older quarterbacks that you get to know that are so nice to being a young quarterback. So I always tried to be nice to the young quarterbacks. I always emphasized my boys as they went on through the NFL to take up time and be nice to the young quarterbacks.
That's so important. That's so cool because I think that's one of the things you see it. I was kind of like that when I got on tour. We had a kind of a little brother kind of system where you had a rookie come in and you kind of. And I think it's so important for those young people. Not that they're looking up to you, but you can pass on some knowledge. I mean, you're not giving away any trade secrets. I mean, it's not that big a deal, but just to make them feel comfortable, and it makes the world a lot better. But when you look back at the toughest defenses, I think it was the Rams you thought were the toughest defense you faced. Jack Youngblood, there was a cool quote you had. Yeah. That had to be tough playing against guys like that, and knowing that they're in the Hall of Fame coming at you and everything. That I think it was the Rams.
It was. I think when you ask, I think a lot of times you ask players about other teams or other great players, a lot of times you'll find them talking about the teams that are in their division because you play them twice a year. Right. I probably don't name as many AFC players because I was in AFC I was in the NFC most of my career. But you're right, we played the Rams. Now, we were in the Western Division of the NFC with Atlanta, L.A. and San Francisco. I never have figured out why New Orleans and Atlanta was in the Western Division, but we were, and we played them twice a year. And oh my goodness, when my first game ever was in old Tulane Stadium, home game against the L.A. Rams, and they had a defensive front called the Fearsome Force, and Deacon Jones and Merlin Olsen were kind of the leaders of that group. And Jack Youngblood was my age. I never played against Jack in college. He was at Florida. Ole Miss didn't play Florida. But Jack and I entered the league the same day and retired the same day, 15 years later.
Wow.
But quick story on Jack Youngblood, who I played against until I got traded. So I played against him for 12 years, twice a year.
Gosh.
24 times. I played against him 24 times. So after his career was over, our career was over. They always announce the Hall of Fame the day before the Super Bowl, and then they take the Hall of Famers over to the Pro Bowl the next day. So Peyton was at the Super Bowl, and they announced the Hall of Fame. Jack Youngblood in the Hall of Fame. And I told Peyton, I said, Peyton, when you get over, he was in the Pro Bowl. I said, Peyton, when you get over to Hawaii and you run into Youngblood, you tell him he would have never made that Hall of Fame if he didn't get to play against me twice a year.
That's awesome. Oh, that's awesome. That's a cool story. That is so cool. I mean, that's the great thing. You loved what you did. You played 13, 14 years.